Hello everyone, this is Damon with PixNub Software, and for this video I'm going to be going over the Image Extract plugin. This is the white and gray screen extraction system that I've been working on and talking about for the last few months in the Facebook group. Now, this is a little bit different than the green screen extractions. So if you're used to easy green screen and having one-click extractions, that isn't what this program does. Unfortunately, I just don't think that's possible for white screen, at least not with Photoshop's current technology. However, I think this will be able to give you fairly quick extractions that look pretty good, probably better than what you can do by hand by yourself in Photoshop. I'm just going to run a quick demo and then I'm going to back up and talk about everything just so you can kind of see how this works. It analyzes the image. Then it asked me to make a selection of the hair, kind of like the dual mask in Easy Green Screen. Then it runs the new Select Subject tool in Photoshop. And at this point, I fine-tune the selection. And then once continued, it runs an auto edge cleanup step that takes 5 or 6 seconds, but it does a pretty good job cleaning up all the edges. Then it brings you into the Select and Mask, and at this time you can choose your tool to go in there and make any touch-ups, and like these areas in there that I didn't select. And then once you're happy with it, you just hit OK, and it gives you a layer stack. And so it's got a non-destructive layer stack. So you see we've got our original image. There is a mask applied. And on top of that there's a color fix layer and a background color. Now the background color is set to black because it's easier to see flaws when you do a white extraction against black. And then you've got this color fix layer that's to fix glowing in the hair. It's at 50%. See if I turn this up, there's less of that white glowing. If I turn it down, there's more. And then you can also touch up at this point in Photoshop because, like I say, you have the mask. This is non-destructive, so you can make any touch-ups you need. So that's the basic workflow. Now I'm going to back up and talk more in depth. So if you plan to use this, please be sure to watch the rest of the video, because if you have questions that I discuss in this video and you don't watch the video and ask me, I'm going to send you back to this video to watch it. I'm just going to start all the way over here. So let's go here. The first thing with white screen, and especially with sports, is almost every image has white on white. And what I mean is, especially in sports uniforms, there's almost always white. Even if the main uniform color isn't white, there's almost usually white accents or white letters in that uniform. And on top of that, everybody has white in their eyes and teeth, like in these catch lights here. These are pure white. We've got an earring that's got white. And so this is challenging. And in the hair here, you know, people think that white doesn't have spill. Well, in reality, if I sample this color, the screen is at 96% brightness, 1% saturation. But if I sample some of these hairs that are on the edge, 95% brightness, 4% saturation. I mean, the white's pretty much taking over. And even, let's go up on the top here. Even up in here, so if we sample, we're 89% brightness in here. If you come in further in, the hair is only 58% brightness. So this white really illuminates the whole edge of the hairline, and so that's something that's a challenge as well. And specifically with white on white. Now, I don't know how many times people have sent me images where somebody's wearing a white uniform and they've got a couple green letters and they panic and say, oh, I can't extract green screen. I've got, green numbers on the uniform, but the uniform is white, and they say, well, why can't I just do white screen? Well, white on white is the same as green on green. If you try to write a program that selects by color, and that's the only method of selection, if you have a white uniform and a white screen, the white uniform is going to get erased. That's just what color selection does. Now, this plugin is for CC 2018.1 and higher, and the reason why is because Adobe has this new Select Subject tool. So I'm going to explain what the plugin is doing while it's running, and I think that'll help you out a lot when you're using it so you have an understanding of what's happening. So the first thing it does is runs this Select Subject. I'm going to do this manually here, just so you can see the results of just the Select Subject. You see we've got this outline that's, it's selected the person. It's actually selected some of the screen inside here as well as some over here, and it's selected the pom-poms and even a little bit more of the screen. So if I just create a mask, you see we have a lot of this white that got brought into the foreground. I'm going to add a solid color just so we can see the flaws. Alright, so this is the mask if we just ran Select Subject. And now you see that it did an alright job outlining, but like around the arm, even where it did a pretty good job, it's kind of choppy. And there's lots of little white pieces in the foreground. And in the hair too. So this Select Subject just kind of gives you a rough starting point for a selection. You can see how jagged this selection is on that arm. So my thought was to build a workflow that's semi-automated that could use this Select Subject as a starting point. The user could finish the selection off, and then they can go in and try to clean up all of the edges and make them look nicer, which will do a better job than you probably could doing everything by hand. And so that's what it does. So as this Select Subject tool gets better in the future, and hopefully it will, the process of running image extract will become quicker. So let's start over again. And I'm going to run this again and just discuss it in a little more detail. So there is two modes. There's the image extract and the image extract batch. Now the batch mode, you still have to do the same amount of work per image, but it streamlines the process, so it automatically opens each image and it automatically saves it for you. And so you can keep the workflow going. And once you get good at this, you can usually get it down to a minute an image or less. So and you can still get out quite a few images. So the first thing is, like I say, this is the same as the dual mask and easy green screen. However, if you have hair, don't skip this step. It allows you to, so if you have an image without hair, you can skip it. But unlike easy green screen, because easy green screen will still give you a pretty good hairline even if you don't use the dual mask, but with the white screen it's not going to. So always make sure you use this, and also make sure that you only select the edges that are needed for the hair. You don't need to select hair that's not on the white, so only what's on the white. But don't come in and select a bunch of extra with the skin areas that aren't by the hair, because the algorithms for the hair optimization can make the skin semi-transparent. So be as accurate as you can with this. Okay, in the next step, you have different Photoshop tools that you can select. And you're going to finish off the selection process. And it starts with the Magic Wand tool, or that's what it selects by default. You do have choices for others, but really the Magic Wand or Quick Select is really all you'll need for the most part. So with the Magic Wand tool, I suggest a tolerance of around 15. Anti-alias, have that checked on, and contiguous. This is the very important one. Make sure this is checked. If it's not checked and you're selecting an area of the white screen, it will select areas like numbers and uniforms and things, eyes and teeth that you don't want as part of the screen. So make sure this is checked. So once you're to this point, you've got, I guess, two options depending on how you like to work. This has selected the foreground, so this is part of your selection, and the background is not part of the selection. and parts of the white it's selected as part of the foreground. If you prefer to select the background, you can invert the selection and work that way. It doesn't matter because when you hit continue, it's smart enough to know whether the person was selected or the background. It's going to figure that part out. I'm just going to leave it as is and work with the foreground being the selection. So when doing that, I need to remove the background that was selected as part of the foreground. So with the Magic Wand tool, I'm going to hold the Alt key down on Windows or Option on Mac, and you see that we've got the minus sign under the Magic Wand. And so make sure you've got that. And when you click, you see that we've now removed part of that from the selection. I'm going to zoom in so we can see a little bit better here. You just want to get these edges as close as you can. Now it's going to go and refine these edges automatically in the next step. It actually runs through about a 10-step process. And 5 to 10 pixels away from this border is where it's trying to optimize around the skin and around the uniform. Around the hair it's going to go a lot wider, but so as long as you get it pretty close, you should be good. And don't get lazy on this step, because this is much quicker than touching it up after extraction, and it's going to usually give you better results than if you try to touch it up inside of select and mask. So I'm going to leave this area and not select these little pieces of white showing through, because I'm going to show you in select and mask. I just want to have something to touch up once we get there. So overall it looks pretty good. So once you hit continue, you'll see this running auto edge cleanup. Now that actually does a fairly sophisticated, it's around a 10-step process to clean the edges up. Now I've went through a lot of changes with that algorithm in particular, trying to figure out the best way to clean the edges up and not cause other problems. So you see that if you remember when we looked at how jagged these edges were straight out of select and mask, you see these actually look pretty smooth right now. Now this does not run any smoothing at all in that 10-step process. So if you want to smooth it out a little more, you can here. Now, if you haven't figured it out already, we are in Photoshop's Select and Mask. That's the next part of the workflow. I like to think of the image extract as a workflow and not a plugin that just extracts it for you. So this is the next part of our workflow. And by default, before I get into this, I'm going to say that I'm on the black background. It's remembered what I chose last time, but choose on black because it's a lot easier to see any mistakes with the white extraction if you're on black. If you have this set to white or even transparency, you won't really see the flaws as much. Now you can turn the opacity down so you can see it against transparency or against black. That's how I like to work. All right, now backtracking to where I was at. So nothing is happening inside of Select and Mask right now. Everything is set to 0. It's just bringing this up in case you have areas you want to touch up. If you don't have anything to touch up, you just hit OK, and it's going to move on. And like I mentioned with the smoothing, that 10-step process that it did the auto edge cleanup does not run any smoothing. I tried to get it to give as nice of edges as possible without running smoothing, because what happens with this smoothing is it can start to round off. And we turn it up a little bit more so we can maybe see something. You can see in here it starts to round off these sharp corners, and it brings back little pieces of the screen. So it doesn't do anything in the edge cleanup to add smoothing. But if you want some smoothing, and if you see a little bit of jaggedness in the skin, then you can add some here. But usually you won't need to. Now, I'm going to show you the pieces that I didn't select when we went through that. If you remember, I just left this alone here. So you've got a quick select brush, a refined edge brush, and a standard brush. And usually the refined edge brush is what you want to use. So you'll just get the crosshairs over where you see screen, and you just kind of brush over it. Now I'm going to make this brush a little bit bigger, and I'm going to show you why you don't want to rely on doing a lot of cleanup in here if you can avoid it. So let's say you had some area you needed to clean up with a larger brush. It's kind of hard to see. I guess you can see it that the black is showing through. I'm going to switch it to transparency. You can really see that's brought some transparency back in it. I've only got one level of undo inside the selected mask here, so what I'm going to do is just use the quick select brush to try to bring that back into where it was. You can also go touch up the hair as well. Now one thing with white screen, and this is just the way it is with hair and skin, this refined brush is very aggressive to erase hair and skin. So let's I'm on black. Let's say you say, okay, the auto edge cleanup on the hair tried to make these hairs semi-transparent because you were seeing white through it, and you need to see the new background through it as well. So you might see where you have some areas you want to touch up. So yeah, by all means, go in and touch it up. But just be careful with this, because I'm going to actually show you what can happen here. If you get too crazy, you can really start erasing those areas. I'll actually go over the skin as well, so you can start to see a lot of that transparency come through with this refined edge brush. Additionally, one thing that's useful on green screen that's not so useful on white screen is this auto edge detection smart radius. I'll show you here. If we start turning this up, it really starts just erasing part of the skin. So that's just the way it is with white screen, and that's why I spent a lot of time on this edge cleanup process. I mean, I probably got 100 hours or more just into trying to get it to optimize these edges around the skin and around the hair the best it could without you having to do too much inside of selected mask, because in all honesty, selected mask is difficult on white screen. I'm hoping that it gets a little bit better in future releases of Photoshop, but for now it just kind of is what it is. So the last thing is this Decontaminate Colors. Let's throw this back against black here. Now this can help to, you see how we have this white glowing in the hair? Now I've got all that transparency that I added back in that I really can't undo at this point, but that's okay. We'll just continue on. So this Decontaminate Colors, you see how that edge hair here doesn't glow as much as it was before? That's because Photoshop is trying to replace the color with this. Now don't use this inside here, because if you do, it's just going to throw that away. So what it does, it creates its, I'm just going to hit apply here and see if we can see it in the layer mask. It's pretty fast. You probably didn't see, but it threw that Decontaminate Colors layer away, and then it went and made its own. It's going to do its own thing with that, so you don't need to worry about that inside selected mask, but it creates its own with 100% opacity. Not 100% opacity, 100% strength in the selected mask tool. I'm going to release the clipping mask here. So we are looking, oh, it's 50% up, and it also sets this layer to 50%. So what it does is it outputs, accidentally made a selection there. Okay, it outputs, this is Photoshop's Select and Mask Decontaminate Colors. This is what it does, and it kind of puts a flat color in there. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of a rough color fix, but this is what the Select and Mask Decontaminate Colors does. So it's putting it at a layer with 100% opacity. Then it applies, remember that hair mask we selected? Because this often doesn't really work good around skin or around uniform colors. It can do some strange stuff, and really you only want this for hair. So it applies that hair mask you made, so it's only applying this to the hair. Then it clips it to the extraction transparency. And then you've got an opacity. It puts it to 50%, so you can adjust that. Now, we're looking at it against a black background here, so once you want to adjust this to look good against the color that you'll be putting it into. And against black is worst case, because anything glowing is really going to show on black a lot more. But yeah, so you can use this, I mean, if you need it. There's a little bit of glowing in the hair. It starts to remove it. 100% is usually too strong. Somewhere around 50 is usually pretty good. So in most cases, you can probably just ignore all that stuff and just use it as is. So anyway, oh, and you can see too, I'm going to show you here. If you remember in the select and mask, where I was brushing with that refined brush, and this is the final output, you can see we have this transparency showing through, and as well as in the hair, and this was from that manual brushing that I did in there. So the moral of the story is here is save yourself time when you're running this by taking the time to make the good selection when it tells you to, and not trying to do all this touch up inside of select and mask or after the extraction. Now you do have, after it's extracted, this is a non-destructive layer set, so you've got the original image and the transparency is contained in a layer mask. So you can at this point use any of your Photoshop skills to go and touch it up further if needed. So this was really developed for somebody who has at least a basic knowledge of Photoshop. Like I say, it's not one click, but in my testing, I've been able to get most images down to a minute or less. And this was the kind of hard image because we've got, all of this, the pom-pom with all of these little pieces and holes and angles and such inside here. So most images will actually be easier than this. I just chose a fairly difficult one for this demonstration just so you can kind of see what you're getting yourself into when you're using this plugin. Anyway, thanks for watching, and if you're interested at all in image extract, please be sure to visit our website, that is pixnub.com.